What was that grief you mentioned there in kind of coming to terms with being so kind of ambitious and hungry and driven in work, and then with the loss of your husband, like what was that? How do you even, yeah, how do you even like engage with that?
Well, I couldn't for a long time, to be really honest. I, um, I was so numb and thrown out of where I thought everything was going. Like, I went to bed one night and woke up the next day, and it was like ground zero. My entire life had was gone. Everything was gone, and I couldn't. My brain was trying to find some type of grounding that he was my person. I'd been with him since I was 18. We've been together for 13 years. I'd grown up with him, and I was given the advice to go back to routine, which I know is a very standard grief therapy, psychology advice. I get back in there. I just couldn't. Walking back into the agency and sitting in my seat that I used to sit in and everything carrying on as normal made me want to throw up. And I knew that I couldn't go back into that, and so I ended up creating my own agency for a while with a wonderful co-founder. But even then, when I thought I was ready to go in and sit down and carry out a normal day, I wasn't. I went and sat down, and then I burst into tears. And I looked at my co-founder. I'm like, "Can't do it." She's like, "Get out of here." I'm like, "Okay." It took me a long time. I was so worried that I wasn't going to be able to have another creative idea because it was so dark in my mind and in my heart. And as a creative, that is frightening. I was terrified. I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to return back to the creative industry, to be really honest. Yeah.
And just, you mentioned there the the significance earlier of almost missing the last meal. Can you give me a sense of even how that unfolded?
Yeah. So it was a very classic scenario for any of those in the advertising world. It was about 6 p.m. on a Thursday night, and I was getting ready to go home. And a late brief came in, right? And so everyone was swirling around, and I got the sense that, okay, we're going to be a bit of a lock in. You'd know that from Irish terms. um, we're going to be here for the duration. And then my phone rang, and it was my husband, Rua. And he said to me, "Look, you better be in that car on the way home. I've made bolognese, and I just really want to have dinner with my wife tonight." A very normal request from a husband, right? But I usually put up a bit of a response to this, which wasn't favored, and there'd be some arguments and some debate. As I said, he was a glorious 9 to 5 man who wanted to go fishing. But there was just, I don't know, there was something in his voice on this night where I said yes. And then the guilt and the anxiety came from really having to go in and tell my coworkers, "Hey, I've got to go. I promised to be somewhere tonight," because I was so worried about, we're talking about self-worth, so worried about being judged as a slacker or not being seen as a team player, and all this negative self-talk. But when I went in and said to them, "Look, I need to leave tonight. I'll be back in the morning," they were really good. And that was a huge deal for me, because if any of them had have said to me, "Hey, you know what, Kaz, we need you to stay tonight," it would have been that easy for me to stay. And I have so much compassion for, if that had happened, the people who had told me to stay, that it was that important. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Whew. And I can kind of probably say that missing that last meal may have pushed my grief to a point where I might not have been able to claw back, to be really honest. Like, it was touch and go for a few months there as it was. But if I had have not gone home that night and missed that, I laugh because it's just a nervous response to the darkness I know that it would
Yeah.
have been. But I got home and I was only 20 minutes late, so I was very proud of myself. And he was so excited and flung the door open. And he had this huge, beautiful smile. And he had the bolognese in the bowl. And I came in and I sat down and we had a very, very normal night together. And then lost him at an accident the following day. Now, I go over that last night in detail in my mind all the time. There are bits that are blurry. I think it's because of the trauma, but there are still things I beat myself up about. I can't remember if I told him that the bolognese was really good. It was always really good. I don't remember if I said I love you that night. Um, I don't. I know I wasn't 100% present with him that night because of the way that my brain works. I would have been thinking about the work that I was doing the following morning. I know that, and that really upsets me. And so that has been the catalyst for how do I help others be present whilst grasping onto the fragility of life? Because it's a real thing.